Now we're going to jump into using CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and this is where we can change the formatting and how our website looks. It's really powerful, and you can start with just the same HTML page, and depending on how you style it with CSS, you can change the look of the website completely. So we're going to look at how we can first of all link to an external style sheet. We're going to talk about the box model, which is this diagram down here, and it affects how the images or elements are positioned on your page. We look at resetting default margin and padding and changing background color to illustrate some of these concepts that we have here. Okay, so back again to our brackets file. We need to create a separate document that's going to store our CSS. So we go File, New, and make sure that this is in the same folder where you have everything else. So if you press Ctrl S to save, I can check that I'm in this working folder that has my index.html and it has my image files that I've used as well, and I'm going to call this style.css. Again, that's a convention. CSS as the file extension is vital, and we tend to call the whole thing style or styles. Okay, so this file isn't linked yet to our HTML file, so even if we make changes to our CSS, you won't see them reflected in this page here. Here I've put in an example of how we define CSS, and I've got some terminology down here as well. So I've put in the h1 tag, and that's what we call a selector in CSS. So what this does is it selects all of the h1 tags in our HTML, and according to the properties and the values we define here, it will update the formatting appropriately. So we have the selector, we have a property, in this case color, which is the color of the text, and the value, which is set to this aqua color. And you separate all of the properties and values by these semicolons. So you can have multiple different lines within a tag. So as I said before though, this hasn't changed what's up here because we haven't actually linked this CSS sheet to our HTML. So let's do that now, and then we should be able to see the color change reflected up there. So up in our head section, if I make a new line, this time we're going to use the link tag, and we have the following attribute. It's a style sheet that we're linking to, and we use href to define where we're linking to. I think that's short for hyperlink reference. So as with our images, as soon as you start typing this attribute, it gives you a few different options here, and because we saved this style.css file to the same folder, it shows up. So we can just click on that, and if I close that tag, you can see straight away our color of our heading changes up there. That's because this is an h1 heading that's defined here, and we've linked to our external CSS sheet here, and in that CSS sheet we've given this tag the color aqua. If we also change the size, for example, you can see the size changes over here, and as mentioned before, you can have multiple different properties in here. We could also put in something like a border, define the size of the border, the type of the border, and the color, and our border goes in there too. I'll also change the background color of the h1 tag, and that will help us illustrate the concepts of the box model that we'll look at in just a second. You see, if I mistype one of these, it shows up in a different color, so it's quite easy to tell that I've missed the R there. It's also important to note that color we need to spell the American way without the U, otherwise it won't work. If I just put in a color like yellow, for example, you'll see that works. It looks pretty ugly, but that'll do for now. If you wanted to change these colors, in brackets you can click inside there and press Ctrl E, and it will give you the full range of colors that you can choose from. And it also gives you the hex code for the color down there that we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Okay, so for now that will do. We've put the background color of our h1 tag to blue, and we've put a border around it. If I bring up the box model, we can look using this to see how it works. You have some content, which in this case is the heading h1. Around that you can have some padding. So if I add a padding tag to this, and I'll add a padding of 10 pixels, you can see that around the text, but inside the border, there is now some space. So if we look back at our box model, we've got the content, which is the text, and we've put some padding that goes in between the content and the border itself. Now if we add a margin tag, you'll see the impact that that has. And I'm going to add quite a large margin just to make it really clear what's happening. So 100 pixels, this case, top, right, bottom and left. So that hasn't affected the space between the text and the border, but it has created all of this white space around the outside of the border that's between this H1 tag and the next tag, which in this case is the P paragraph tag down there. Okay, so that's a good introduction to the box model and how it works. One other thing we're going to do is just reset the margin and padding for the whole page, because by default different browsers have different sets of default padding and margin that can affect the way that the website is displayed, and that's particularly important if you're wanting to put a background color that goes right to the edge of the page, or if you want to have this text going right to the edge, because you can see there is actually just a little bit of a margin on the left there. So to do that, we're going to add another CSS selector, and in this case I'm going to put it right at the top, and we're going to use the wildcard, the asterisk symbol there. And just with everything else, we use our curly brackets and we put our properties in between, and I want to set the margin to 0 and the padding to 0 as well. So that resets everything for the whole page, but if you do change something like this, that will override it because this is more specific to that tag. So this is just a default overall margin and padding, and if you change it elsewhere it will override what you have there. But if we look over into our website now, you can see that the text goes completely up against the edge, as does the image and the video and everything like that. So later on we will build in some more margin and padding there, but for now it's a good idea to get into the habit of resetting everything like that. Okay, that's it for this video. Make sure you've got your website up and running so it's looking good like that. You can change the margin, padding, play around with the colors and borders a little bit, and see how you can get your website to look.